The Monday agenda today is looking onto the topic of water resource and biodiversity preservation. And with me on the program is Engineer Florence Mahai, who is the Basin Director of Lake Victoria Water Board. Welcome to the program. But also I have Edith Ruth Lukanga, who is the Executive Director for IMEDO. We'll have the opportunity to understand what exactly the organization does. But we also have Engineer Olivier Viguier, the Chief Resident Engineer of an organization called Aegis, who will also tell us a little bit about his organization, but also, and very lucky to have with us on the program, Dr. Lulu Kaaya, who is a lecturer at the Directorate of Aquatic Sciences and Fisheries Technologies at the University of Dar es Salaam, all to speak about water resource and biodiversity presentation. Please welcome to the program. So just 1 minute, the audience would really like to understand what it is that your organizations do and your role in the Lake Victoria, because that's the case we're going to discuss in the next 45 minutes. To start with you, Engineer Florence Mahai.
Lake Victoria Basin Water Board is a government institution which is responsible for water resource management. And this role of water resource management in the basin is threefold. We do water resources assessment, which is basically to answer the question, how much water resources do we have in the basin? And then the second function is water resources allocation, which is to give access to water users, access to using the water resources which is there. And the third one is water sources protection and pollution control, which is the subject of today.
Engineer Florence, thank you for that great introduction. And we have the Executive Director of IMEDO. Please let us know about your organization and your work on the Lake Victoria.
IMEDO stands for Environmental Management and Economic Development Organization. It's a not-for-profit organization that was established in year 2006 to contribute to improving the situation in the lake basin itself, because the establishment was a response towards the challenges, the environmental, the social challenges that were facing the Lake Victoria. So from non-governmental perspective, we were set to contribute towards empowering the communities to participate in the management of the Lake Victoria resources. So our vision at the end of the day is to see the people, the communities living in a sustainably managed environment and themselves participating in the development and governance processes. So we enhance the capacities of the communities so that they are able to understand the situation that they are in. They are able to understand the regulatory frameworks that governing different sectors within the basin. But at the end of the day, they are part of the problem and therefore they should be part of the solution. So that's what we do to empower them to be able to participate.
And Engineer Olivier, tell us more about Aegis and your work, especially on Lake Victoria.
Aegis, we are a French company. So we're in Mwanza, we are implementing a project within a government project that is led by the Ministry of Water and Mwanza Urban Water Supply and Sanitation Authority. So the target of this project is to extend the access of water and sanitation for people from Mwanza City, Magu, Lamadi, and Misungwi, which are satellite towns for Mwanza. So this project, it should also help to increase the quality of the water quality of the lake. Because the pollution to the lake will be should be less.
Excellent. And Dr. Lulu, tell us more about the role and especially of academia towards the topic on table, which is water resources and biodiversity preservation.
The universities or the higher education institution generally has three key roles. The first one is teaching and learning, and then research and knowledge exchange. And as per the department where I'm coming from, it's the Department of Aquatic Sciences, which is holding the responsibility of teaching, training, research and knowledge exchange on issues of aquatic ecosystems. And Lake Victoria Basin is a freshwater environment, the freshwater ecosystem. So our involvement as a department comes from either teaching or research. And particularly myself, I've been working mostly on freshwater.
Okay.
Yeah, so my research areas have been on freshwater, and I've done a number of work on Lake Victoria, and particularly focus is either on ecosystem, biodiversity, but also pollution.
Excellent. Now, just to dwell straight ahead into the Monday agenda, the program itself, and the world today is looking onto the issues around climate change. And Tanzania is not excluded from the effects of climate change in the world. And just from either your studies or your practices or from your management, how has the climatic change at the global level impacted Lake Victoria here in Tanzania? Probably you want to start contributing, engineer?
First, looking at the lake itself, that big water bodies, Lake Victoria as a lake is the second largest water body on Earth. And its dynamics is influenced by what comes into the lake as well as what goes out of the lake. So with the sheer size of it, with the big size of it, the surface area, which is at 68,000 square kilometers, the surface area of Lake Victoria. So it is really difficult to influence the fluctuations in water levels because of the big size. Now, putting straight the statistics, considering what comes into the lake, 80% of what comes into the lake comes from rainfall, which falls on the lake itself, 80%. Mm-hmm. And then only 20% is contributed by the rivers which go into the lake, and other sources, maybe groundwater, although it's not quantified. So really, if you want to talk of the effects on the water level of the lake, then you would really be talking of the rainfall which is falling on the lake, as it contributes to 80%. Mm-hmm. Now, the projections on climate change, which have been downscaled to that region, has it that overall there won't be any change in terms of what's coming into the lake. Okay. from rainfall. Okay. Of course, there are spatial variabilities. Mm-hmm. In one part there may be small rainfall, in other part there may be elevated amount of rainfall, but overall there's no change. And therefore, with regard to the lake itself, the water levels will not change considerably, and therefore we should not worry about the effect of climate change on the lake itself and the lake levels.
We saw on social media, and of course this is social media, it could be unauthenticated information, that actually the water from the lake overflew onto the nearby hotels and houses, which is one of the probably effects of climate change. So when you say that it would not impact the levels of water, if for instance the level of water increases by say 1 millimeter, will it have any impact to the surrounding villages and human activities?
Climate change is observation of maybe a parameter, say a weather parameter like temperature maybe. Correct. You observe it for not less than 30 years.
That's true.
And then you say, has it changed from the long-term average? And then you talk of climate. Otherwise, what we see in everyday life, this is called weather variability. Mm-hmm. And that's what we saw on that day. When there was a lot of rainfall, there was rainfall plus wind. Mm-hmm. So that wind pushed water into this, which is a normal phenomenon. So climate variability is something we live with every day. Okay. There will always be flooding, there will always be droughts, because that's the nature of weather which we live with every day.
Eddie Trudith, maybe for the past 13 years since your organization was founded, the issues of human settlement. You're speaking about, in your introduction, you said you look onto that variety and how, one person could be the cause of the problem and the solution. How would you describe the rate of human activities impacting or having any effect within the Lake Victoria?
Looking at the population around Lake Victoria, almost they all depend or rely on agriculture, for example, or fisheries, and also other activities including factories or industries, mining, for their livelihoods. So already these are human activities. So how do these human activities impact or affect the lake ecosystem? If they're done in a non-sustainable way, that's where the challenge is. So there is always need to be some kind of consciousness and a balance in a way that human activities need to be done in a way that does not harm the environment, and in this matter, the lake. For example, the water resources policy speaks of not having any human activities within 60 meters from any water body. But what is happening now, for example, we are seeing a lot of people cultivating along that buffer zone. Mm-hmm. And what they use, they'll be using fertilizers, they'll be using pesticides, which are not very well monitored. Mm-hmm. And when it rains, what happens? All the effluents are taken away to the lake. Mm-hmm. And at the end of the day, it adds into micronutrients, for example, the nutrients in the lake. And there are a lot of other problems that come along with such kind of addition of these nutrients.
How much of a level of human activity can actually really cause an impact to such a huge water body? This is the second largest lake in the world. So even if we say all Tanzanians go and cultivate along Lake Victoria, will there be such an impact to actually attribute to the changes that you're speaking about?
I would say yes.
Okay.
Though when it comes to evidence, if you want to really measure, you may not see significant change immediately. Okay. What could be seen is only along the shore waters, because they are less deep. And for example, when these effluents are just entering the lake, they tend to dwell along the shores. And most of the lakeshore communities rely on that water for domestic use. They will go and drink that kind of water, which is already polluted. Okay. And then also it affects not just the lake, even the livelihoods at the end of the day, because once you drink or you use that water which is not very well, which is polluted and maybe at that moment is not treated, it would add more cost into, like for example, treatment of the diseases. So it's all linked up to one challenge and the other. So in general, again, as to respond directly to your question, you may not realize how big the impact is because of the nature of the reservoir itself, because it's very big. But if you go into like single sources, for example, you just single out like these adjacent communities, that's when you would see the impact. I don't know if you allow me, I may give you an example.
Please go ahead.
Yeah, between 2014, we had some kind of, had some interventions with the fishing communities. We were training them on the effect and impact of illegal fishing. So they were trained in a way that at the end of the day, they developed bylaws that whenever any person is caught, they will be disciplined based on the bylaws that they had put. So they were facing problems like diarrhea, but also some other health-related issues, even including related to impotence, for example, for men. So that one was alarming in a way that they were already facing it, they are seeing it, and that made a big impact for them to take actions immediately. So this is how it could happen.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's probably hear from Engineer Olivia on the same line. The issues of human settlement, but as well as the issues of access to drinking water and sanitation, the issues of water pollution. You've been doing, Aegis has been doing a lot of activities around Victoria's research. How has that actually caused, she spoke the issues of diseases, but is it something that you can concretize in terms of the impact and the effect of the people and human activities within the Lake Victoria Basin?
The water which is used to be treated for drinking water is water which is nearby the shore. So all this water, once it is affected on the quality aspect by human activities, it means this water, it will be more difficult to treat it. It will cost more. So this, it will be also an impact for the population, because to support the cost of to treat this water. And also it's the same for sanitation side. Sanitation has to be controlled and improved in order to minimize the impact of sewer on the lake. It's all these aspects, it will be for sure seen on the long-term aspect, but it's something that it should be a priority concern from now.
When we speak of human activities, when you envision the lake, most of us would think fishing, and transportation, and probably a little bit of intrusion to the buffer zone in agricultural activities and mostly horticulture. What are some of other, economical activities that are happening within the catchment area that could actually bring such effect, which again it's not notable within the very short period of time?
Transportation. And then there are communities living within the lake. Remember, you have islands which are populated there, and activities are ongoing there. So those may be causes of pollution in the lake. But then the biggest problem is happening on the catchment area, not even in the lateral zone, on the catchment area. Remember eutrophication, which is the biggest problem we are having now of the lake, is a result of nutrient loading. So from livestock keeping, that's a big contributor. But the agricultural activities which are happening in the catchment, then although it will be small, and that we call diffuse pollution, diffuse pollution, from a big area, but small, because of the sheer size of the catchment, then its impact into the lake is huge. And also we have the point source pollution, like the industries, the small scale mining, because those are different to manage. If we have those big scale miners, you can manage them, where they are. They have very sophisticated treatment facilities, so the impact to the lake is minimal. But then these small scale miners are many and all over the place. Difficult because they are not, they can be today here, you come after 2 weeks, they move to another place. So they have a very big impact, but very difficult to manage.
But I'm thinking of the mining activities that Dr. Kai has just mentioned. The mining activities, the use of chemicals such as mercury. Do we literally have to wait? Is it something that could actually be measured now, and these activities be controlled, not to wait for 30 years when people line up for cancer treatment, for instance? I can't really say if mercury directly causes cancer, but it's chemicals in the water, and people drink this water. Animals drink from this water, and we eat and drink milk from the cows and eat them fresh from the cows.
The 23 about years lag that he said for the effect to be felt is specifically for the effect within the lake. Okay, and that is because of the dilution factor with the size and the volume of the lake. But within the basin, within the catchment, the effect could be felt immediately. Okay. So depending on where mining is taking place, but usually it could even be on the upper catchments. So the effect could be felt from the upper catchment to the middle, to the shorelines of the lake as immediate as it is being polluted. But within the lake, the effect is where now it will take a longer period of time.
Because of the volume of water?
Because of the dilution factor. Yes.
Okay, dilution factor.
In our analysis, we don't see a problem with mercury, because mercury is always below detectable limits. But it doesn't mean that it's not there. So in drinking water, mercury is not a problem. The problem with mercury comes in the sediments, which are deposited in the lake. In the lake, and then you have ecosystems, or for instance, fish species, which feed on that, and then so you go up into the food chain, and there is bioaccumulation, and that ends up into humans. Yeah, but then I think that's where one area which, for instance, the board needs to work with the other institutions, the health institutions, their institutions, so that we can come up with definitive answers. Because so far there has been speculation as, is it a problem, is it not a problem? Are plastics a problem, are they not a problem with regard to the water resources of the lake? Because as you know, it's a source for so many things. The lake is so important. It supports so many lives, so many economic activities. So I think it's now high time that we, as a board, we sit with the other institutions and try to look a little bit more into this and see if there's a reason to worry or not.
Does that have a direct impact to the water in the Lake Victoria?
For instance, if a forest is cleared and then burnt, there may be deposition, on-site deposition, and there has been monitoring of phosphorus and nitrogen on the lake, and one source of it is from the air. And now where is that coming from? Then from such source of burning bushes but then deforestation affects the hydrological cycle, and therefore it will affect the seasonality of how the flows goes into the lake. It will affect how much groundwater is being recharged. If we remove the land cover, and then less water will be going into the groundwater. And therefore, a place where you had a perennial river, the river will turn into being seasonal. So yes, there are some effects, but not on the lake itself and the lake level, but rather on the rivers, which are, and remember, most of the livelihood activities, most of the life is happening in the catchment area rather than in the lake itself. Yeah.
Soil cover is removed, and when it rains, then the sediments are just swept away to the lake. And what is the impact of that? The first thing is on for example, the shores. That's where fish breed. So the breeding sites are affected because they will be covered by mud, for example, and then it affects the whole ecosystem. But then it would even go further. I wouldn't say to what extent, but also sedimentation. That's another challenge. And it comes with it these nutrients, the nitrogen, the phosphorus. And when they enter the lake, they contribute into the eutrophication of the lake. The lake becomes a medium to facilitate growth or thriving of, for example, the water hyacinth. So again, that leads to another challenge. They continue to proliferate, and the impact of that again is related to, for example, creating anoxic condition, because when they cover, they even struggle for the utilization of oxygen with other organisms in the lake.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just trying to emphasize on the effect of deforestation, and this affects directly the farmers. For example, when the soil is left bare and then sediments are swept with the water to go into the river and then into the lake, that sediment that is being swept contributes to making the soil become less viable in terms of agriculture. For example, fertility, okay, because
It's
most
all
of the
swept.
nutrients is swept. So the
Yes.
soil now continues to worsen and become less fertile to support agriculture, which now becomes a problem to the farmers within the
And then
watershed.
and those nutrients which are swept to the river and then to the lake, do they have the same value at the lake? You know, not at the lake, but at the lake in terms of attracting agricultural activities.
So what is actually now happening, because they will still hold the same nutrient value.
Yes.
Now farmers are moving to cultivate along the shore. So you find there's a lot of horticulture activities along the shore because people go there because now the nutrient is there.
Okay.
And that is also creating another problem
Which
of
is?
destruction of the shoreline. The vegetation that is surrounding the lake is now being cleared also because people want to come and do cultivation of vegetables and so forth.
And that's where we have all the chemicals into the water.
Yes. Because
Okay.
the buffer now is stripped off.
Okay.
Yeah, because those vegetations are natural filters. So it's the farmers who see that as a potential area of cultivation, they remove that filter, and then what comes in goes straight into the lake.
Lake Victoria is enjoyed by 5 countries. And that being the case, Kenya being different in all the aspects as Uganda, although we share the same water body, Rwanda and Burundi. Any activities in Kenya and Uganda have any direct impact to the Tanzanian side, although we have the larger percentage, which is 51%, I understand, in terms of invasive species that could probably have any impact within our water side of the lake?
It is one water body shared by 3 countries which touch the lake, but the catchment area has 5 countries. Since it's one, what happens in one part of the territory of Kenya can affect what is happening, can affect the other parts of either Uganda or Tanzania. So as the way it is, it calls for cooperation among the countries so that if we are doing a certain activity, then it should be uniform for all so that the effects can be minimized in all countries, and therefore, so that being the case, the East African community saw it important that they form an organization or an institution which will be responsible for management of the water resources in the basin, and that's why we have Lake Victoria Basin Commission. Lake Victoria Basin Commission is headquartered in Kisumu in Kenya. So its mandate is to coordinate the member states' activities to make sure that there is sustainable management and utilization of water resources in the member states.
Tanzania does not enjoy equally the water resources that we have in the country in terms of, economic activities such as fishing, unlike Kenya and Uganda. But I understand countries like Uganda have enormous fishing activities. They do cages, which we do not do in Tanzania. Why?
First, let me put the statistics correct. We
Yes.
now do
Okay.
cage fish farming in the lake, and my board is responsible for issuing permits for people who do that.
Okay.
But I understand they have to have 3 different permits from us for using the water, from NEMC, if the project requires environmental impact assessment, then they'll go through, but also from fisheries people to make sure that where they are going to do cage fish farming is an appropriate place. And it is a coordinated place. It's not somewhere, for instance, the ships pass and things like that. Or it's not somewhere where there is nursery of the fish and things like that. So although we are not very advanced as compared to others, but we have started, and those activities are now ongoing, and there is a vibe. You can see a lot more and more people coming into the business. So that one we are doing now. But this issue, of course, we came later. Why? Because as much as we have Lake Victoria Basin Commission, but it is still true that these are 3 different sovereign states with their own laws, with their own mandates. So the role of the commission is to coordinate and harmonize things. But since you are dealing with sovereign states, then it takes time for things to be harmonized. And yeah, Tanzania, we may be slow, but for instance, in our Water Resources Management Act, we have principles. One of them is precautionary principle, that in the situation where you have no information to do informed decisions, then you better learn slowly and slowly. So maybe that's why it took us time to.
And who is providing this information? Who gives this information to prospective or current fishermen? Who is to provide this information? Because what you're basically implying, which again I stand to be corrected, is that the fact that Kenya and Uganda have probably far advanced in terms of information sharing, that you can actually go onto the lake, do some fishing activities, 1, 2, 3, 4. But in Tanzania, we are slightly lagging. We're going into cage fishing now, while Kenya and Uganda have probably been in practice for over 15 years. So who is to share this information, and how is it disseminated? How is it passed on to the community?
The community has that role of coordination. So they have that role of also coordinating the member states to make sure that they have a platform for information sharing. So that's why I said, maybe because of that precautionary principle, we said let's wait and see what are the effects in the Kenyan and Tanzanian and Ugandan side. Now we are sure, okay, there are no very big effects. That's why we have gone. I think that's the approach when I said the precautionary principle. But who has the obligation to share? For instance, with our law, the developer, the one who is going to do cage fish farming, has that obligation of generating and providing that information. But at regional level, then it's the Lake Victoria Basin Commission to coordinate the sharing of the information on behalf of the East African community.
I just wanted to add into his words that why has Tanzania been slow into acting and into looking at that as an opportunity, as a potential opportunity?
Yes.
Yeah. Again, yes, as sovereign states in Tanzania, it went for a study because cage culture is not something that everybody can just do it without having prior information on, for example, where to locate these cages. It depends on also the ecological conditions of the lake, like the currents, because you cannot locate the cages where the currents are high because they can be swept away. So this structure, the study that has been done to map the potential areas where cage culture could be done.
Who has this information?
My understanding is that Tanzania Fisheries Research Institute was part of the study also. And I think the custodian now is the Ministry of Fisheries.
Okay.
Yeah, the Ministry of Livestock and Fisheries through the Fisheries Department. And I could recall even the minister, when going around, he tried to sensitize the communities, the people, to see that as a potential investment. Yeah, so also kind of awareness raising is done through that.
Okay. To understand, how do we then, from the academia point of view, increase the interest? Maybe before I say increase the interest, but are you satisfied with the number of people, young people especially, into the department? And if that number is not very much big, how do we then increase the interest of many young people were getting into the universities to actually gain interest into the issues of water resource management, the issues of biodiversity, issues of, just preservation of our water bodies in Tanzania.
Tanzania is one country that is highly enriched in terms of freshwater resources. We have lakes, rivers, wetlands, to name them. But we have taken long time to develop the capacity among ourselves within the nation to come and understand these ecosystems, to do research in terms of biodiversity, but also the potential ecosystems that they can offer. And I will give an example. For all the public universities we have in Tanzania now, we have, I think, Sokoine, University of Dar es Salaam, and UDOM that are teaching partly aquatic sciences courses. And the ones that started longer focused only on the marine side, on the ocean, studies of the ocean. And less really has been done for the freshwater. But for the recent years, within this decade, I think, is when we have had bachelor programs that at least takes in the concepts of aquaculture, takes in the concepts of freshwater ecology. But for example, until now, we don't have a bachelor degree program on freshwater ecology. Imagine with all this freshwater richness. But again, as he was saying, in terms of understanding how, as a nation, do we venture in some of these opportunities for our people, our university have now made a decision of moving into starting these degree programs that specifically will train the youth and focus on freshwater ecosystems, freshwater conservation, and such alike. So it's a new, that's another thing, it's a new program. So usually when it goes into the market, it competes with what other causes that have been there for ages are doing. So it is also a responsibility for us to speak for the profession, so that we can encourage the youth around all these basins within the country to consider and come and do these programs.
The access of drinking water, and especially from the lake, from your studies, from your activities, and the issues around sanitation, what has been one of the major challenges that you've encountered towards ensuring that the people around the basin have actually access to clean drinking water, and issues around sanitation, especially from the lake zone? I know it's a big issue there.
So yes, the main challenge we can meet, it's on the water supply. There is not the main challenge really is what you can say, but the perspective, but in the future the water quality may degrade, so that it will turn maybe the existing facility not to be in line anymore with the requirements, with the standards, but in force here in the country. So this is the big threat we can have on the water supply side.
And what can we do so that we don't get to that level? So
really the principle of precaution should be the main point, because we should avoid to degrade too much this resource which is the Lake Victoria. In my opinion, is not to try to keep the water quality, not to degrade it.
Okay, and just to finish, a special compliment back to you, Engineer Florence Mahai. What are the alternatives if we do not have people engaged into these activities that may endanger biodiversity within the basin? What are the alternatives? What can people do?
We are not saying that they shouldn't use it, but sustainability should be there, and that's why we are. The board is there to make sure that there is sustainability. That's why the laws are there. The law regarding protection of environment is really about sustainability. So yeah, as much as we have alternatives, but we can continue using the resources which we have in a sensible way. so that it is here today and it will continue to save us tomorrow.
Another alternative is using the agroecological approaches of production. That's very important because it does not employ the use of chemicals, the use of pesticides. So this is really important, and communities should be trained on agroecological approaches to production. That's important.
That marks the end of the Monday agenda. I'm your host, Austin Makani, but really thank you all for your active participation. 45 minutes have lapsed. I still had a lot to ask, but I truly am grateful, and I will look for more time to discuss these issues. But thank you so much, and this was the Monday agenda, and thank you for watching.